Hi, fourth graders. We're going to keep looking at some math together today. We've got two goals with this video. First thing we're going to do is we are looking at finding fractions of whole numbers. So that's dealing with things like if you're asked to find what half of 24 is. Then the other thing we're going to look at is comparing fractions with different denominators. And quick reminder, classroom norms. We're going to have a positive attitude. We're going to be respectful. We're going to keep trying even if it's hard. I know for some of you, fractions are a little scary, but we'll get through it. We'll work through it. And then the last thing is remember the word yet. So these questions come from the page called Conrad's Room. It's 2 pages. It's page 115 and page 116. Now, page 115 is going to look really similar to what we were doing in the last video, where we're using multiplication to find out groups of objects. And if you're having trouble with that, you can take a look at the last video. What I want to look at is on page 116, question 4 says fill in the blanks. And we've got A through F. And that first one I already said is looking like half of 24 is blank. Half of 24 is blank. Now, like usual with math, there's a couple strategies we can do to solve this, but I want to show you a model that I was thinking of for solving this problem. Let's say that this blue paper I've got right here is representative of 24. Now, when I'm finding half of 24, I want you to see if I fold it in half, or even take these pieces and pull them apart, I've got 1/2 and I've got 1/2. Or I've got 2 groups. So what we can do when we're finding something like half of 24 is we know that we're taking 24 and we're splitting it into 2 even-sized groups. So now we can think to ourselves, what number plus itself, or what number times 2 would equal 24? And this is a problem that most of you will know right off the top of your head. It's a quick multiplication fact. And I'm not going to tell you the answer. But we can use that strategy for a lot of these problems, thinking about if we're finding what 1/4 of 24 is, we already took 24 and we divided that into 2 even-sized groups, or halves, and we can do that again, and instead of dividing it to halves, we divide it into fourths, or 4 equally sized groups. So, same idea, 24. Now we've got it into 4 even-sized groups. I can tear that apart. And then I need to ask myself, I'm taking 24 and breaking it into 4 equal parts. And again, remember, equal sized. What number times 4 is going to equal 24? Or another strategy, you could take the answer from the last problem, what half of 24 was, and find half of that. So that's how we can look at finding fractions of whole numbers. Now let's take a look at question number 5. It says fill in the blanks with less than, greater than, or equal signs. And most of you will remember from our unit on fractions that when we're comparing fractions, if I've got 2 fractions with the same denominator, remember denominator is the number on the bottom of the fraction. If I have 2 fractions with the same denominator, I've got 2/4 and 3/4, I can compare the numerator, or the number on top of the fraction, to figure out which one is bigger. So in this case, 2/4 and 3/4, since the denominator is the same, fourths on both, compare the numerators. 3/4 is greater than 2/4. But if you look at the problems on this page, we don't have the same denominator. Let's take a look at the first one together. We're comparing 1/3 and 4/9. Now, as always, a couple strategies we could use. Some of you might want to make a picture and maybe like draw a circle and divide a circle into thirds and ninths, or 3 equal sized pieces and 9 equal sized pieces, and then shade in 1/3 and compare that to what 4/9 looks like shaded in. And that can be a good strategy, although it's not super precise. So I want to show you how we can use some mathematical equations to solve this and have a really precise answer. So the first thing I need is I need to have denominators that are the same. So I'm going to look at these two denominators, and I'm noticing that there's a relationship between thirds and ninths. I can multiply this number by a number to get that number. Some of you already know, some of you are thinking. Yeah, so if I multiply 3 by 3, that'll get me 9. But I'm not done yet. When I'm working with a fraction and I change the denominator by multiplying it by another number, whatever I multiply that denominator by, I have to multiply the numerator by the same number. So I'm going to do that up here. I multiplied 3 by 3 to get 9. So now I'm going to multiply 1 by 3, so multiplying by 3 in both cases, to get 3. So with that in mind, I know that 1/3 is equivalent to 3/9. Now what I can do is I can take my new fraction, 3/9, circle it so we remember what we're talking about, and compare that to this fraction of 4/9. And now it's just the same process we did earlier, where since we have the same denominator, or the number on the bottom, I can then compare my numerators, the number on the top, to figure out which one is bigger. I'll let you figure out that last step by yourself. And that's what we can do for all of these problems. And that is a really, really good strategy for comparing fractions because it's very precise. Unlike the drawing that some people will want to do, which can work in some situations, but isn't super precise. One last thing I want to show you is that you can multiply both fractions if you want. So if we look at B, we've got 7/12, and we're comparing that to 4/8. And in our last problem, we saw how we could multiply 1/3 to get a denominator of 9ths and compare 4/9 and 1/3. In this problem, we can't really do that. There's not a number that I can multiply 8 by to easily get a denominator of 12. So instead, what I'm going to do for this problem is I'm going to multiply both sides. And I'm going to multiply them to find a common denominator. Now let you explore that idea a little bit on your own and see if you can come up with an answer. You can think of B as a really good challenge problem. And I'm going to let you explore what you can multiply both sides by, and you can multiply them by different numbers to find a common denominator for those two problems. All right, fourth grade friends, make sure you take a picture of your work and you send it to me or Ms. Schaefer. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.